Well, various groups have gathered outside the embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Pretoria today to demand that the country be freed from state capture and corruption. The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, along with Defend Our Democracy, OUTA and Corruption Watch, have expressed their outrage at the release of the Gupta brothers who were in custody in the UAE after a failed extradition attempt by South Africa. For more on this, let's speak to Defend Our Democracy's Reverend Ntlha. Reverend Ntlha, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Let me get, before I talk to the demonstration that you held today, your overall sense of where freedom stands for the majority of South Africans, especially when you consider the context of this holiday and the fact that it was the first democratic election, an election in which the poor, disenfranchised black communities in this country were able, for the first time, to elect a government.
That's correct. I think often that goes out of sight as people go through their daily struggles. But it's very important for us to remember that this freedom is something that has cost us dearly for over hundreds of years, 300 years. More than 300 years, ever since the first colonists set foot on this land, that people have been fighting for this freedom. So 1994, 27 April, is an important marker of our journey as a people. And it is very sad that in the first 30 years of our democracy, people are already giving up on the freedom and forgetting the price that they went into, or the sacrifices that went into achieving it. And so I think it is important for South Africans to cherish it and to understand that it is our right, all of us, and our duty to defend this freedom, to expand it, to nurture it, and to take it as our national asset, regardless of how many things are not quite working as they should. I think we should put our effort to righting those wrongs that are being perpetrated against the people, those government leaders that are corrupt. I think we should demand accountability, which is one of the reasons we are protesting for the government to do all it can to get the Gupta brothers to book.
And why that cause today, sir? Why march to the embassy of the UAE out of the multiple forms of corruption, especially that we've seen in the almost 3 decades of this country's democracy?
Correct. I think that we obviously are disappointed by the United Arab Emirates for releasing the Gupta brothers from their duty to actually be repatriated and brought back to South Africa to face the full might of the law. I think because it is Freedom Day, we're doing this in order to call to attention the fact that it is our duty to defend this democracy against any perpetrator who would like to undermine it, such as the Gupta brothers, but also such as those that collaborated with the Gupta brothers, such as all of those fingered in the Zondo report. We can't obviously protest all of them at the same time, but it is part of what we aim to do to keep in the public eye all of those issues that the Zondo Commission brought up, so that on a day such as this, we do not throw the baby of freedom with the bathwater of corruption.
And it's also important, is it not, while there is this pressure on government especially to do all it can to have the Gupta brothers extradited to appear before a judge here to answer to the long list of allegations against them. But it's also important that when we do talk about corruption, which, as we know, involves both the public and private sectors, that we note that it predates the Guptas and the state capture period, which was investigated by the Zondo Commission. There had long been corruption before, and we're hearing this corruption continuing post.
Correct. Yeah, I think one of the things that we probably didn't realize and should have done so was that freedom brings with it the responsibility to espouse values that are codified in our constitution. Unfortunately, we have put in government people who undermine those values that would sustain this democracy, that would steward it and make it a worthwhile thing for all South Africans. But we have political leaders who continually, at every opportunity, undermine the values of this constitution, and that's why our very democracy is at risk, and it's the duty of all of us as South Africans to not approach this task of defending this democracy as one that is anarchist, one that is losing hope. But we realize that it took 300 and some years to get us to this point. We aren't going to be throwing this democracy away just because of 30 years of graft. I think we are stronger than that. Our character was tested over hundreds of years. Then I think it is important to have a memory of where we've come from and a vision of where we want to be, and not allow the short-term setbacks to completely demoralize us.
And 1994 signified a moment of change, a moment for change in South Africa. People realized that their vote, their opinions mattered and could shape the future of a country. In subsequent decades, that faith in the power of the vote we've seen begin to wane. What are your expectations ahead of 2024 when we're going to face an election in the 30th year of this country's democracy, at a time when people are without jobs, at a time when there's rampant corruption that we can't even keep up with in many cases? Public services are a mess. You go to any public hospital, people tell you of just how bad things are, and there's no electricity for 24 hours a day. You have had to now come to terms with the fact that there will be, at some point, an outage for up to 4 hours straight in whatever area you live, regardless of your socio-economic standing. So what is the power of the vote today?
Well, I think the simple fact of the matter is that all of the things that you have mentioned, they must be laid at the door of the ruling party, which is the African National Congress. And I think as a people, we have to separate the African National Congress from democracy. That's why one of the campaigns we run as a defender of democracy is a electoral reform, because the current legislation on elections almost guarantee that political parties that by themselves get to decide how service delivery happens or doesn't happen. They get to decide what happens to people who are guilty of corruption. I mean, it's like writing the laws that decide how those who have been caught in corruption, which is a very treasonous thing. I mean, corruption is the single most important thing that undermines the freedom of the people, undermines this democracy, and violates the poor in important ways. And so it's important for us to reform the electoral system so that we get to a place where there's greater accountability, that the concerns of the people of this country matter to those who govern them, and that if they do not, those who are in power do not take it, there must be ways of removing them. So we are driving for more accountability, more swift accountability, so that we are able to expand the gains of this democracy.
Reverend
and make no mistake.
Thank you so much for your time today, sir.